Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today is the second in a four-part series where we are discussing various concepts to help you implement and learn and successfully have DevOps transformation in your organization. And this session we'll be talking all about source control, GitHub, Azure repos, integrating Git in Azure repos, and much, much more about CI/CD in Azure pipelines. My name is Hussam Mohsini. I'm the program manager for Microsoft Reactor in Abu Dhabi. Microsoft Reactors are hubs for founders and developers to meet, learn, and connect to local peers, as well as industry-leading ideas and technology from Microsoft partners and the open source community. It's also the home to the Microsoft for Startups program. With a diverse mix of hands-on workshops, expert panels, and community events, there is something for everyone. Check out our calendar of events on meetup.com and join our coming sessions. And don't miss the remaining two parts of this four-part series on DevOps. I'm going to share all the links with you in the Q&A tab. We continue with our speaker, Anthony Prem. Anthony is an Azure technical trainer at Microsoft, specialized in Azure infrastructures and applications. He's passionate about technology and how it can solve complex business problems. And he keeps the customers up for success by providing deep technical advisory and consulting through training. So again, keep the Q&A tab open. I'll be sharing the upcoming sessions in this series. I'll be sharing some learning material for you to continue the journey, and also you can send us all your questions in the Q&A tab. We'll have stops to answer these questions, so feel free throughout the session today to send your questions. And yeah, I don't want to take longer in this introduction. I would love to hand over the mic to our speaker, Anthony, to start today's session.
Thank you, Hassam, for the welcome note. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Reactor Meetup Group and Azure DevOps Learning Series. Let me share my screen. Give me a second. All right. So today we are into a second episode where we are going to discuss about managing source codes and Azure Pipeline. In the next 60 minutes, we are going to perform a greenfield deployment using DevOps approach. So here are the high-level steps. So I do have a source code ready, which we are going to publish into development target, which is about Azure DevOps, Azure App Services, using the DevOps approach. So the first step is to have the code ready, and then we are going to create a brand new Azure application, Azure Web App and DevOps project. Then we are going to publish the source code into the Azure repository, which is nothing but the source code system. And then we are going to configure the pipeline. Basically, we are integrating the Azure repo and Azure pipeline. And then Azure pipeline further connects to the actual instance, which is basically Azure Web App. And then we are going to see if we can identify any bugs. And then we are going to publish that into the Azure board. And then again, developer can start creating the branch to discuss about the existing bug, and then they can create the pull request. They can merge into the master branch, and then this cycle will continue. This is what we say continuous integration and the continuous deployment. So we are going to start everything from scratch. So let's get started. All right, so here is my source code. Basically, I have a simple single page web application. I do have a sample, very simple code. Now this is basically it's running on my local machine. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to provision the Azure Web App instance. That's going to be vanilla instance. So for that, I am going to use a small ARM template, which is already pre-configured. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to deploy the web application. So I'm going to place everything inside the DevOps demo folder. As of now, there is no instance of web application exists here. So let's go ahead and deploy this. So the idea is we have a source code here, which we are going to publish inside the Azure repo, and then we are going to create the pipeline. Pipeline is going to create the build for us. So let's get this created first. So I'm going to select the resource group, which is DevOps demo, and I'm going to name it as Reactor demo staging. And I'm going to have another instance, which is production. This is just an app service plan name. You can name it anything. All right, so what it's going to do here, this is going to just deploy the web application instance, which is going to be brand new and there is no code inside. And we are going to publish this code through the DevOps approach. So this is going to take a minute. Meanwhile, we can go back to the DevOps organization and we will create a brand new DevOps project. So I'm going to create a project. The project name is going to be Reactor demo. And I'm going to use Scrum as my work item process. Okay, so we see the validation is complete. We are going to perform the deployment. This is going to take a minute. Now the project is ready here. All right, so as of now, the point you have to understand here in Azure DevOps consists of several services, which is basically Azure board. It's just like a Kanban board where the project managers or project team members can track the list of items, work items that is placed here. And repo is the repository where you can publish your source code. And we have a pipeline. Pipeline basically it's a workflow which basically integrates Azure DevOps and the application instance. And then we have a test plans and we have an artifact. So now what we are going to do, we do have a source code ready, which is sitting inside the local machine. And I'm going to publish this first into the Azure repo. Right? So this is just getting deployed. So what we can do first. So as of now, we have the code ready. That's the first step, which is completed. The second step is to create a Azure web app instance and the DevOps project, which we just completed. The third step, what we are going to do, we are going to publish the source code into the Azure repo. Now, how do we publish the source code into the Azure repo? So we can go back to the Azure DevOps project. So this is the Git repo command lines. So I'm going to copy this command line. If we want to publish any code to the Azure repo, you can copy this command line. Basically, this command line let you copy the files. So I'm going to perform few commands. So once we complete this, I will talk about the different concept. All right. So now where is my source file located? First, I need to select. I need to initialize my directory. So inside this directory, I have my source file exists. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to initialize this first. This is the first command, and then I'm going to add all the files. Then I'm going to make a connection to my Git repository, which is basically this is the one which is coming from the Azure repo. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to I'm going to add the remote origin. And then we are going to make a commit. So this is the command. All right. So now we are going to perform a push operation, and this is going to update all the content from local machine to the Azure repo. So at this point, you see the changes is going to be updated. So let's go back to the repo. And you see here the source code is being updated to the Azure repo. And if you want to look at the history, definitely you can go back to the history and see this is the first commit which we just performed here. Okay, so now let's go back to the presentation. So we are into the step number 3, which is publishing your source code to the Azure repo. So now the next step is to create the pipeline. So we are going to configure the Azure pipeline now. So let's go back to web app instance. Now this is my web app instance we just created, which is staging and production. So in fact, if you look at this, there is a slot. Slot is basically it's a feature of Azure App Service. This is called deployment slot. So actually speaking, there is 2 instances of web applications exist here. So this is my staging app. This is my production app. Now inside my production app, I have a staging slot. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to deploy my application binaries into the staging slot. Then I'm going to install it on the canary slot, and then I'm going to install it on the production slot. So now let's quickly go ahead and explore what is inside here. And this is my app service. And when I browse this, I just get the basic template that comes from the app service. And if you want to really look at it, what is inside this app service, you can go back to app service console, and you can just you basically you get into the actual machines. Now when you do the dir, you see there is a hosting start.html file exist. So now what we are going to do, we are basically going to integrate Azure DevOps, which we just created. And we have all the source code which is ready in this pipeline, and basically we will be having a pipeline, and the pipeline is going to connect the source code as you know into this instance. So let's see how to create the pipeline now. So now I'm going to Azure DevOps project, and this is my DevOps project. Inside this project, I'm going to create a pipeline, and now as of now there is no pipeline exist here. So let's create a pipeline. To create a pipeline, you have to say where is your source code exist. So in this case, we just updated the source code into the Azure repo. So I'm going to select Azure repo as my source code repository. In case if you are having the source code into the GitHub or Bitbucket or any other version, you can definitely choose that as well. It is going to authenticate, and then you can continue from that point. So now, since my source code is located in the Azure repo, I'm going to select Azure repo. So I'm going to select my source code. Now you see here there is a Azure Pipelines.yaml. There is a YAML file. Basically, this is the configuration file that you need to provide. In case if you don't have this file, you can develop this file. You have an option to choose the respective task that you are going to execute. You can in fact choose it from the Azure portal. So what is basically we are telling here is we are saying whenever there is any changes that happens on the master, there is a trigger is going to happen. And here we are specifying the build agent image name. So basically how the build works is behind the scene, Azure DevOps provision a temporary virtual machine, and that virtual machine will be used for our building and releasing activities. So we are just specifying that Ubuntu latest image is going to be used, and then we are also saying the list of tasks that will be executed as part of the build process. So all we have to do is just trigger this. Now this is going to take several minutes. And there is a build process is going to be executed now. And in fact, if you want to deep dive what's happening inside, you can definitely go to the job and you can see the series of actions which is going to happen as per the list of configurations that you have specified on the YAML file. So now the job is getting started, and you see here, in the YAML file, we specified a few tasks. If you look at the YAML file once again, you see here there is a archive files task and there is a publish build artifact task. So behind the scene, there are some scripts which is actually published already by the Azure, and you see here the respective the build task is getting executed here. All right, so now the build process is complete. Now what we have to do, we have to create a release pipeline. So now the release pipeline is the place where we are going to integrate Azure DevOps and the app services that we just created here. So let's go ahead and create the release pipeline. So now I'm going to create a release pipeline. Now here the point you need to understand is what is your deployment target. So in this case, my deployment target is app service. So I'm going to select the app service as my deployment target. So I'm just selecting app service, and here I name it as a staging, because my requirement is to build my application on the staging first, and then it goes to the canary, and then it goes to the production. So I am naming it as staging, and then I'm going to add my app service instance. So this is my subscription. I'm going to authorize this, and then I'm going to select my application instance. In this case, it is web app on Windows. And then I'm going to select my app service name, which is basically, you see now the app service, which you are seeing here, Reactor demo stage. You should be seeing it here as well. Yeah, so Reactor demo stage. So this is where I am integrating my pipeline into the Azure app service. Now the staging stage is created. Now what we are going to do, we are going to clone this stage. So let me go back to the pipeline. I'm going to clone this stage because I have three instances. I have first instance staging, and then canary, and then production. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clone this once again. I'm going to name this as canary, and I'm going to name this as production. So let's integrate this task with the actual canary instance, which is basically demo-prod/canary. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select my production instance, and then I'm going to target this to the deployment slot. So this is my resource group, and this is my deployment slot, which is canary. I'm going to save this once again, and again I'm going back to the pipeline. I'm going to modify this production stage. I'm going to change this to production. I'm going to target this to the deployment target, which is production. All right, so this is production. So, okay, so now we have the pipeline ready. Basically, we have a staging, we have a canary, and we have a production. So now this is the point where you have to produce the artifact. So this artifact basically comes from the build task that we have executed. We just executed a build task. See, the outcome of the build task is going to be the artifact. So I'm going to add the artifact here. So this is the artifact name. We just made a build. All right.
Anthony, sorry, I want to jump in quickly.
Yeah.
I just want to make a note for everyone who's joining us today that you can adjust the playbacks quality in the settings. It will be on the bottom right corner there is a settings for it, so you can adjust that. And Anthony, may I request you also to like zoom in, enlarge anything that you are
Yeah,
presenting? That will help because some are facing some issues with the streaming and it affects the quality.
sure, I can do
Okay,
that.
thank you so much.
All right. So, so we just build the pipeline. So we have the different stages, which is staging, canary, production, and also we have added the artifact. So now we are into stage 4, which is configure Azure pipeline. So we are still in the stage 4. In fact, we haven't performed the release operations. So what we are going to do now, we are going to create a release. Now, this is the pipeline. Basically, this is the pipeline. So pipeline is nothing but set of workflow which you can define based on the way you want it. So for example, here I can put some pre-deployment conditions. I can put some post-deployment conditions. For example, let's imagine whenever there is any build that happens on the staging environment, I want my team member to be approved by the stage. I mean, I want someone to approve the stage. And then the post approval, this can automatically go to the canary and production. In this case, I can go ahead and set the post up deployment approvals on the staging. So first let's go ahead and initiate the release, and then we will come back here and modify the pipeline configurations. Okay, so now the pipeline is completely ready. We have added the package and we have added the different stages, which is eventually linked to the deployment targets. So now let's save this, and I'm going to create this release now. Now in this release, if you want to exclude any stages from automated to the manual, you can do that. Otherwise, you can keep it as automated stages. So I'm going to make it as automated because I want my requirement is whenever there is any changes that happens on the repo, it should automatically create a build and it should automatically get released to the stages, and the deployment should be automated. So that's my requirement. So I just created the release. Now let's go back to the staging deployment target and try to launch the website URL. So still you will see this. This is the hosting start.html. So now if you want to see what's happening in this release, you can go to the release. And you see there is a task is going on. And if I want to know more what's happening inside, I can click on the staging. And I can see here, the deployment activities is actually going on. Behind the scene, there is an agent that is called build agent. The build agent is actually facilitating the deployment for us. Okay, so now let's go back to the pipeline, and you see here the deployment is in progress. So what happens is now the package is getting deployed into the staging, and as soon as it completes, it goes to the canary. As soon as it completes, it goes to the production, because we haven't done any post deployment conditions or pre-deployment conditions. So now what happens is, going forward, whenever there is any change that happens to the repo, the build will automatically trigger. And then once the build is complete, the release stages will be automatically happening. This is what we say DevOps is going to accelerate the continuous deployment and the continuous integrations. Now let's see how to configure the continuous integrations here. Let's go back to the pipeline once again. So to perform the continuous trigger, you have an option on the artifact, which you can enable here. So once you enable this, you have to include some branching policies. So if you want to filter any branch, in fact, you can do that. Otherwise, you can explicitly say what are the branches to be included as part of this the automated deployment. So here I am including master branch. So whenever there is any changes that happens on the master branch, automatically there is the deployment is going to trigger. And the same time, if there is any changes happening on the branches, other branches other than master, then the deployment will not continue. So that is the policy which I'm actually creating the filter here. Okay, so now let's go back to our application and see how's if the deployment is complete. So now this is my staging app, which is Reactor demo stage. When I browse this, I can see the application deployed into the app service instance. Now this is what the DevOps is helping us. DevOps basically accelerating the application delivery. Now, once you have the necessary process in place, then going forward, it is very easy for developers to, quickly make the changes. In case if you identify any bugs, you can report it into the Azure board as a work item. Then developer can go ahead and pick that respective task, and then they can work on it. They can do the new release. Then this process can seamlessly happens using the help of Azure DevOps services. So now let's go back to the other instances, canary and production. You can always go back to the releases and see if the deployment is successful. Yes, I see the deployment is succeeded on the staging, deployment is succeeded on the canary, deployment is succeeded on the production. I can go back once again to the other deployments, production. So let's see if this is success. Yeah, I see the deployment is success now. Now let's go back to the presentation and look at the point number 5. So the point number 5 is we are going to identify if there is any bug, and we are going to publish it into the Azure board. So let's go back to our let's imagine this is my source code and I'm going to add some changes. So this is my VS Code, and I have opened my application code. So I'm gonna add some other lines here. I just wanted to show you a few things. Making change from master branch. Going to make a update. Now, as soon as I make any change, I have an ability to push this code to my Azure repo. So what I can do, I can perform the commit from here. I'm saying added first change from master. So let's go back to Azure repo. So you can look at the history here. You see here the second change, the first change basically which we just triggered from my VS Code, which is getting updated here. And there is a, the changes is in progress. Now, as soon as the commit is complete here, you can see the build pipeline is going to trigger. And this is, let's go ahead and look at the release. It's still, there is no release happened, but it is waiting for the changes to be completed. Yeah, the commit is succeeded now. So now let's go back to the release pipeline. The build should have been triggered. I think we haven't activated the continuous deployment trigger. I think I haven't saved the this continuous deployment trigger. That's why it didn't trigger, but otherwise it should trigger. Okay, so now you see how this is the pipeline should be configured and how we can integrate the pipelines with the Azure DevOps. Now what I'm going to show here is, now let's see, I'm going to talk about the branching strategies. So now I see there is a typo here, and we wanted to get this typo corrected. Right. So now let's talk about some of the branching strategies. So let's talk about the PowerPoint for a minute, and then I'll come back to the presentation, come back to the demo. So let's talk about source control. What is source control? So source control is it's a practice which will help us to do the necessary tracking, and it will help us to manage the code seamlessly. So all the changes, all the updates that's happening, which is on the master branch. So there is a concept called branching. So branching is basically, it's allow developers to isolate the code from the master branch. So let's imagine you have the fully functioning code which is on the master branch, and I wanted to make some changes. So instead of making the changes on the master branch, what I can do, I can clone the copy. I can clone a local copy, and I can make my changes, which is basically we call it as a branching. And in the branch, I can make all the changes, and then I do have an option to publish or merge into the existing master. And before I do the merging, there is a concept called pull request. So pull request is basically, I can ask other developers or reviewer to review my code, and then he can review and approve. And once it is approved, we have an ability to push this or merge this into the master branch. So that is called the branching, pull request, and managing the source control. And there are two types of source control mechanism, which is centralized and distributed. Azure repo does support centralized as well as the distributed options. So in the distribution, basically, you have a master copy, and then each developer, they can clone the repository, and then they can work isolatedly, in the isolated environment, and then they can create a branch, and then they can commit the branch. So it will give you a lot of flexibility when it comes to managing the environment. All right, so now let's talk about the flow. How this works is, first we right now, as of now, we have a master branch, and now what we are going to do, we are going to create a new branch because we realized there is a bug in the application. So we are going to create a new branch, and then we are going to make some commit. Basically, we are going to modify the code, and we are going to perform the commit. And once the commit is complete, we are going to create a pull request and see how we can work on the pull request, and how we can discuss about the existing code, and then we can do the merge operation. And once the merge operation is complete, the deployment cycle will continue. The deployment will automatically trigger, and then it will go through the deployment pipelines. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate now. So we are going to talk about the branching strategies now. Okay, so there was a question. So let me quickly go back to the Q&A. So there is a question. So using 3 stages, because if we look at our pipeline, we adopted 3 stages: staging, canary, and production. So basically, there is a question which is talk about why are we using 3 stages, and is it a Microsoft best practice? So the answer is there are different deployment patterns, and this is one of the pattern, which is called canary pattern. We also have a blue-green testing. We also have a A/B testing. We also have a dark release. So there are several deployment patterns which we will discuss in the next episode. So based on your requirements, you can actually decide the necessary deployment patterns. And this is basically canary deployment. So canary deployment, the whole purpose of canary deployment is to test your application in the production for the small set of users and see how the application is functioning, and then you are releasing this to the production instance. That's all about the canary deployment pattern. but we will talk more about the different patterns in the coming episode. Okay, so now let's quickly go back to the branching. I will quickly validate the pipeline once again just to make sure the deployment is triggering automatically. So the branch is included master. Okay. Okay, so now let's do one thing. We identified there is a typo. We identified there is a typo. Now we are going to rectify this typo from the branch. We are not going to do it on the master. So how do we do that? Let's leverage the Azure board. So let's go back to the Azure portal, and Azure portal, let's create a new work item. I'm going to report this. Yes, there is a bug. So I'm gonna report this as a bug now. And here I'm going to say typo detected. Yeah, I'm going to just to, I'm not going to add much information. I'm just going to say there is a new bug and I'm going to save this. Now this is going to be the work item. This is basically one of the work item from the Azure Scrum, which is bug. Now, if you want to see how many work items that you have, just give me a second. Okay, so now this is the Azure board. So Azure board basically help the project team members to understand what is going on in your project. So I see there is one bug is detected. I see there is one bug. Now what I can do, I mean, if I'm a developer, what I can do, I can, I know I can create a new branch from here. Basically, I don't want to make a change directly on the master branch. Instead, I'm going to create a new branch. So I'm going to say that it's a bug branch. And I'm going to create a branch now. Okay, so now if you look at the history, there is the changes that happens on the master. So now let's go back to our local machine. So what I'm going to do, how do we check on which branch I'm in? So you can use the simple command, which is git branch. So which will tell you where are you actually located. So in fact, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to uh, select the branch, which is bug branch. So now I can see now here I'm still in the master branch. So if I want to switch to the bug branch, so what I have to do, I think there is a typo here. So let me create another branch. So git checkout. So now you see here the I am into the branch which we just created. So what we are going to do now, we are going to going to make some changes, and we are going to make a correction, and I'm going to save this. And I can now, what I can do, I can publish this change because the changes is corrected. Now if I can basically I can publish this changes to the I can commit this to the bug branch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to execute this following commandlets. So, okay, now the changes has been updated. Okay, so now we are not going to merge this because we don't want to merge it directly to the master. Instead, we are going to use the pull request. So we wanted to understand what is the change and what we are going to do on top of the pull request. So now you see here in the branch history, you can say, let's go back to the repo. You can still look at it. The typo corrected, we just made a change, which is basically committed, but actually not merged to the master branch, right? So this is where we are going to create a pull request. So what we are going to do, I see here there is a pull request available. So we can create a pull request. And here basically you have an ability to discuss with your peers about this particular code. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to create a pull request. So your team members basically can work on this. You can review the code and you can, update the comments and correction is complete, whatever. Please go ahead and merge. I'm just giving very small example, but you can just amplify this in a corporate scenario, in a real-time enterprise scenario, where you can have a very healthy, active discussion with your peers about the specific changes that you are going to bring. So I'm gonna the idea is, the point is to make you understand about the meaning of branches and the meaning of pull requests, so that you can connect the same scenario with your production scenarios as well. So I'm gonna complete this. The moment I do the completion, you have several options, like how you are going to merge. It's actually again merging strategy. This merge means it is maintaining the history, and then if the squash merge commit means, in case if you are making multiple commits on the same branch, then basically you are not maintaining the history of the existing within the branch, but then you squash it and then you are merging it to the master. So I'm going to do the no fast forward merge. I'm going to do the normal merge, which basically maintains the history of the branches changes reported. Now we see the merge operation is complete. Now you can go back to the master repo, and if you look at the history, I see the changes that we performed on the branches, which gets updated and it's get merged to the production. Master branch. Now there is the merge operation is in progress. And as soon as the merge operation is complete, you are going to see the pipeline is going to be triggered. And this pipeline basically further, once the build operation is complete, the release operation is going to trigger, which is eventually take this code and release it to the production application instance. And this all happens automatically. You don't have to do any changes. So let's wait for the, I'm going back to the staging once again. So let's see if the deployment is triggering. Okay, so meanwhile, let me go back to the questions if we have any questions. Yeah, so can we automate the bug report into Azure board after failure of deployment stages? So the answer is yes. So you have a lot of ability to publish the test results, and in fact you can there are a lot of tools and extensions available in the Visual Studio. So let me just quickly show you here. Visual Studio. So Azure DevOps behind the scene, there is a marketplace, which is marketplace.visualstudio.com. And when you go here, you will find plenty of tools. Yeah, so this is the basically this is a marketplace for Visual Studio. So if you go here, you will find a lot of tools that can support you on various stages. As we discussed, there are several stages such as planning, code, build, deploy, release, testing. There are a lot of stages, and each stages you will be performing various tasks and various set of a series of activities. In fact, you can identify the list of extension that you need. For example, if you see here, there is a test and feedback extension. There is a Sonar Cube to validate your code. You can have the necessary extensions installed on your DevOps so that you get the necessary task added. For example, if you are adding the Sonar Cube installed, what happens is in your pipeline, let me go back to the pipeline. You have an ability to add the task. Let me show you here. So you have an ability to add the task. If you see here, one job and one task, which is basically one deploying the application package into the instance deployment target. That is the only one task we have added. But if you wants to add more tasks, for example, if you wants to publish something, you can create more tasks. You have a various tasks from the build, various tasks from the test, various tasks from the other areas. You can basically get the necessary extensions installed from the marketplace so that you can have the necessary task. Those tasks can automatically update the work item for you, which is something absolutely customizable. All right, so now let's go back to the release and see if the release is complete. Yes, the release, you see here the release number 2, which got triggered after we make the changes. So now we can go back to our application and let's browse this. And you see the typo is corrected now, and we just did the code changes and we just did the commit, and Azure DevOps began the scene. It actually created the build, it created the necessary releases for us, and it deployed into the various stages, and your application is 100% ready now. Now let's quickly go back and look at the dashboard and the work item that we created. And you see here the work item is automatically moved to the completed stage. So now think about the same scenario in a production enterprise scenarios. You can imagine you can do amazing things. In fact, your team members. Let's assume your team members have started adopting the Azure DevOps services. So definitely it can make your team more agile and you can achieve faster things and you can go to the market very quickly. That's the whole point I'm trying to convey here. All right, so now what else we have to visualize something, right? So if you look at the presentation, we have stages. So let's quickly recap what we have discussed so far. So, we have the code, we published the code, and we created the pipeline, and then we identified the bug, and we published into the Azure board, and we managed to have the branching, pull request, and merge strategies completed. So now what we are going to do, what else Azure DevOps board have, and what are the dashboard capabilities in order to track or manage the reporting from the reporting aspect. So in the Azure DevOps have a dashboard where you can customize your dashboard. As of now, we don't have anything here, but then definitely you can add the necessary widget that you need. For example, let me add few things for us. Build history, maybe. You have amazing widgets available. You can basically customize this based on your requirements. Pull request. So I'm gonna say, okay. Okay, so let's configure this. Done editing. Yeah, you see, you can completely customize your dashboard. That's going to even simplify your job. All right, so yes, there is a question. The dash B is to create the new branch. Yes, yeah, that's correct. All right. So hope that demystified some of the concept behind Azure DevOps. So now it is very important to understand few terms, the very important key terms that's being used in the Azure DevOps that are uh, uh, that are yeah the agent, artifact, build, continuous delivery, continuous integration, deployment target. So let me quickly touch base on these points. So agent is basically, when you create a build behind the scene, you require a virtual machine. So there are two kinds of agents available, which is Microsoft hosted and self-hosted. Microsoft hosted agent means Azure DevOps will automatically provision a machine, and using that machine will be used for the build activities. So that is self Microsoft hosted agent, and that machine will be discarded as soon as the build process is complete. In case if you wish to have a dedicated machine, then you can have the self-hosted agent. You can install the agent from the Azure DevOps portal, and then you can designate that as a self-hosted agent. And that agent, there is a difference between Microsoft hosted and self-hosted. The Microsoft hosted machine does not support parallel jobs. Let's imagine you wanted to have a parallel deployment executed. So you may have to either buy additional parallel jobs, or you may have to go for the self-hosted agent. So that's all about the agent. Now artifact is the package that you are going to receive once your build process is complete, and that artifact will be used during the pipelines. Build is all about, it's the process where we compile the source code so that the outcome of the build is going to be the artifact. And continuous integration, continuous deployment, it's all about whenever we make any changes on the code, Azure DevOps automatically creates the build and it relays to the production. That's all about CI/CD. And deployment target is basically the endpoint. In this case, we have used app services as a deployment target. It can be app service, it can be container, it can be a virtual machine. So any Azure service, it can be a deployment target. Now job is basically the stages. The stages may contain one or more jobs. For example, if I go back to the pipeline, in the pipeline you have an ability to create multiple stages. You have an ability to create multiple task. For example, in this case, if you want to add additional stage, of course, you can have the testing stage. It really depends on your application. So in this case, we have three stages: stage, canary, production, and inside the each stages we can add several jobs and we can add several tasks. So pipeline, it's all about, it's a kind of a workflow what you are defining as part of the deployment release. Release is all about releasing the package to the different stages. Staging, it's all about the environment. It talks about the environment. And trigger, it's make sure that whenever there is any changes happens on the code commit, the trigger is automatically makes you build in an automated manner. So these are the key terms that you may have to understand when it comes to DevOps pipeline. And I hope I have demystified the DevOps concept, and I'm sure you have learned something new today. And thanks for attending today's session. And if you have any questions, feel free to put it on the Q&A section. And this is the end of today's presentation. So next week, what we are going to do, we are going to look at the deployment patterns and the feedback mechanism. What are the different deployment patterns available, and what are the different feedback mechanism that we can receive from the users, receive from the application, and how we can incorporate those to create a continuous feedback loop. So I hope you have enjoyed this presentation, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Anthony, for today's session, and it's great that you highlight what's coming up. I shared with the community on the Q&A tab the links to the upcoming 2 parts in this series. So there are four topics that we are going to discuss. We just did one, and this is the second one. The first one is on YouTube. I put the link in the Q&A tab, and today's session is also recorded and it will be available on YouTube on the Reactor channel. So towards the end of this series, we'll group everything in under one playlist, and you can always go back to it. And thank you, David, for sharing your feedback. He's saying that this series is absolutely brilliant, and he started to put it all together in his head. So yeah, it's all about, you know, connecting the dots and making sure all these concepts are clear to all the community members, and you're able to implement them into your projects and organizations. So yeah, so don't forget also to send us your feedback on the Reactor survey. I'm gonna paste the link again. It was the first one I shared in the Q&A tab. So this is where you can send us your feedback to the topics that you love to see at the Reactor. Follow us on social, and also make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and don't miss on the upcoming part 3. It's there in the chat. I also shared some learning resources on Microsoft Learn for you to continue the journey and learn more about the topics that we are discussing in this series. So also make sure you check out these things. I hope you're having a great rest of the week, and actually it might be the start of the week for many of you actually. So yeah, have a great week, and see you next week, same time, to continue this journey with Anthony. Thank you, Anthony, so much for sharing your experience with our Reactor community.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye.